Okay, here we go. Everything's rolling, everything's coming in smooth. Happy Valentine's Day, Lil Chad.
Happy Valentine's Day. Their script, I'm sure that we are in real life spending it in a different way since this is a recorded show.
That is right. We are with our respective Valentines this evening. But for those of you out there who are watching us in the future or on the replay, hope you're having a good Valentine's Day weekend with your loved ones, with your significant other, and whatnot. Because we've got a story today that's definitely about love and or an approximation of it.
Yeah,
And
I think in the broadest sense, it is, I suppose, a very corrupt, weird form.
a corrupt, weird, twisted form of love, if you want to call. I mean, there's a little bit of lust there too as well, but it's something. And I mean, like at the time of the recording this, I mean, this is we're in the honeymoon phase of a certain change of the guard politically, and we'll see how that goes. But for now, we wanna focus on the on this type of weird uh, Lynchian type of story, I guess. Before we go any further, so we're not going to keep any on bated breath right here because this is too juicy of something to talk about. So let's get started. Welcome to Scripts on Saturdays, the only screenplay review show on the interwebs discussing scripts both professional and amateur circulating around Hollywood, giving you, the TV and movie-going audience, a behind-the-scenes and inside track on what writers are pushing and what producers are buying. I am your host, the Script Doctor, and joining me this week is Little Chad. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing pretty well. You send me the weirdest scripts. Sometimes it's fun.
It is. I'm a
Yeah.
little jealous because sometimes, well, every script I send that's weird, it's not one that I write, and the weird, and I also like to write weird stuff on occasion. Not this weird, but I strive to one day. I strive to.
Yeah.
So yes, for this week's script is titled "How to Save a Marriage." It's written by Ross Evans. It ranked fifth place on last year's Blacklist, 2024 Blacklist, with 29 votes. Little Chad, please share with us the log line for How to Save a Marriage.
All right. In hopes of spicing up their marriage, a husband and wife join a mysterious couple's retreat, only to discover it's a front for a dangerous cult.
Right. Now that's
Not at all what the
not at
script
all
was.
what the script is. Right.
I
But
feel like that might have been like the log line for version one of this script, like 18 rewrites ago or something.
that's what I'm wondering too, because I double checked. I'm like, did I do the wrong one? Did I screw up this? Like, nope, nope. There it is on the hard copy that I have. We'll see what happens if the digital changes anytime soon, because it is. I didn't PDF it. But the synopsis, which should be a lot closer to the actual content of the script, goes as follows: Jake and Emma, in desperate bid to save their fading marriage, delve into dark fantasies, inviting mysterious forces into their lives. As we piece together their past, we see how their journey for a connection unfolds. Will their bold experiment mend their bond, or does it doom them to an abyss from which there's no return? Uh, yeah, closer.
That
Not
was
quite,
much closer.
not quite there, but closer.
You
uh,
know, in the ballpark. The other one was not in the ballpark.
I would say, yeah, that's closer. Yeah, that's definitely within the field. Hasn't gone into the parking lot yet, like the first one. But yeah, this as I mentioned earlier, this is a. I mean, I was reading it. My first impressions were like, this is the type of script like a David Lynch fan would try to do. And the reason I think that came to the forefront of my mind is because he's recently passed away. So I was wondering if that was influencing me as I was reading this, but it was hard to grasp because this is a very weird script. Little chat, please share with us your first impressions. Um,
I also thought it was weird. I think, and I talked a little on background with you on that, that it reminded me of like peak late 90s, early O's, like independent, edgy film
mm-hmm.
where they were trying to like do all the, and very much like almost a, like you said with Lynch, like a Lost Highway a something in that kind of vein, where it's just like, or a where you got a lynch thing where they don't explain everything. Sometimes they don't explain anything,
Mm-hmm.
and you've got a lot of weird stuff going on. In some ways, to me, it was a little more straightforward and generic than Lynch would have probably done something like that. But it was somebody channeling that kind of edgy Lynch style, like independent film, wanting to be bold and dramatic.
Right. And you know what's kind of weird is that the way that this script was written, definitely you get a strong visualization of how this would be like shot and how it would look. It would kind of have like an American Psycho type of color palette, and you can tell like maybe cinematography to it or what have you, because it's we've got this little house in Wisconsin, we got this big office in downtown somewhere, like near one. I don't think they really specify exactly what city they're in, but we do know they're in that state. Um, we also know that it's quite near a lot of wilderness, which is of course something that Wisconsin is also fairly famous for. And we have this interesting through line where our couple, Jake and Emma, the one thing that they seem to share and not have any issues with at all is they like listening to this true crime documentary, and following up some of the active news reports on a certain murderer who we never really see, but has made claims that they have buried a whole bunch of bodies in this certain area, and the police have still yet to find any of them. So
Yeah,
that's like
like
an
40
underlining.
years later.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's a podcast going over a serial killer from like 40 years ago in the area of where they live in Wisconsin,
right.
which isn't out of the realm because I think Wisconsin was the home of Gacy, if I remember right.
I
Who
will. I can't remember, but I'll take your word for it. But I'm sure if we're wrong, someone will let us know in the comments or chat section. So that's quite all right.
Yeah, and he was, the basis of tons of serial killer lore. you know,
Very
Texas
inspirational
Chainsaw
and
Massacres.
yeah, very creatively inspirational. To explore that. I hope not inspirational to anybody, but again, there's not everybody's got a solid head on their shoulders, of course. Um, with this particular script, we actually open up. It pulls a trope that I'm not a fan of. It's a very TV style trope. It's we are entering into a house of a murder scene with a number of dead bodies, and it's we got the rookie cop and the veteran cop kind of making their little assumptions based on what they see and what is shown, and then we kind of flash back to almost a few months, almost a year later, if I'm not mistaken, quite a while.
There's lots of jump arounds in this script,
Mm-hmm.
and I gotta be honest, the script, one of the big flaws in the way this script was written is, especially once we start discussing some of the major plot specifics, it's not a very clearly written for characters
Mm-hmm.
or place and time. To use the broad storytelling, senses, right? Who's speaking and what is their place and time of speaking. So I would, as one of the, since we do like to do this on this program, one of the piece of advice to the writer would be to try to clean up your formatting and style to make it clear to the reader on person, place, and time. Because I got lost a couple times, and I went back and reread it to make sure I had a good handle on that. But yeah, so I believe we jump back in.
We have flashbacks within flashbacks. I'll put it that
Yeah,
way.
that's the other thing. We jump back within the jump backs. I
Yeah, and
think
then jump
once.
back to the first jump back, and it's I mean, it's a little jarring. Like one of the things that is to its bonus and to its detriment is that the script has a flow that reads very quickly, but the fact that it's not organized and not highlighted with regards to where you are in story geography, I guess would be the best term. You kind of have to double back again. because sometimes you get, because again, this is a very dialogue heavy script, so it has a snappiness to it because it's all conversation there, and then when the action occurs, it's compartmentalized and it's very poignant. But we go from the house to the work to an office to another office back to the house, and it jumbles around so quickly um, that you kind of forget where you are when the scene lingers a little longer than what you've had before. And this comes big into the first act because after we get to this, we cover the crime scene, kind of similarly paced in the way when the U.S. crew in The Thing finds the Norwegian um, crew camp, and they start going through that, and they see like the axe in the wall and the one guy with the slit throat and all the weird carnage that has occurred into their base. The opening scene with the cops kind of follows a similar model because it's one piece of new discovered evidence placed up there, and they all create a narrative that pays off later. But in this case here, it's definitely that TV teaser style of writing, which is, oh, we're showing you the aftermath of a murder. Now we're going to go back and you're going to see how we got here. And I just don't really like that method. It doesn't always work. This case here, I'm on the fence about it because
Because the conceit with the story that you get about the beginning of the second act
mm-hmm.
makes you would lead you to be very questioning of what you saw. So I get why you're saying like you in this case it's a little harder to be as straightforward about it. But I still don't like it. I know
Yeah.
I think we've talked about this on the show. I hate when you try to jump into something dramatic at the beginning because you're not comfortable with how you're opening your movie or story otherwise. You're trying to hook them with a gimmick then you play around with linear storytelling by doing this. And it's very rare. To me, I can count on like one hand the times I've seen it work
Mm-hmm.
versus like and for as often as it gets used. I don't like jumping. Start your story with something organic that gets attention without doing some kind of gimmick of time jumping or non-linear storytelling.
Yes, I agree because like even this whole setup and to the flashback, they do it all in one page. And the way that second page starts, which is basically just inside the main character's bedroom, months earlier, but we don't need that. It would be inside the main character's bedroom, Emma and Jake, and they're just lying in together, and they're listening to a serial killer podcast, and it it I mean I can understand from the writer's perspective he probably thinks that this is kind of boring. I was fine with it because as soon as they finish listening to the podcast, which happens in the first quarter of the page, they're in very disconnected, boring sex, and it's like, oh wait, this is interesting. We've got like a routine here now, right? Like because Emma's phone alarm dings, and then they each like get up and they go, and you realize, okay, they're this very comfortable marriage. They have a schedule that they do, and it also appears like once we finish the love making part of the scene, which is actually kind of awkward, we realize, oh, they're trying to conceive a child. And then once they finish that part of the duty, they go back to the next episode of the podcast. And that's enough of a hook, I think, with regards to, oh, okay, so we have this type of marriage. We have this as a marriage of convenience. It feels like it's soulless, it's loveless, it's functional as opposed to just going through the motions. And where's the love and anything else that's supposed to be behind it. It's not there, and I think that's just as good of a start for this story than having to do the whole one-page setup of this murder, a crime scene in the home type of thing.
Yep. And I will say, once we got into the story proper, and maybe you might have felt the same way. I got a very if you've ever seen, and our audience who's listening or watching may have seen a movie called War of the Roses with Michael Douglas.
Yeah.
and is it was it Kathleen Turner?
Kathleen, I think it's
Yeah,
Kathleen Turney. Yeah.
yeah. And it's basically the beginning of this movie is watching War of the Roses, but you skip all of the part where you see them loving each other and happy,
Yes.
and go right to like the part in the third act, which I'm cool with it. Because I've seen that, you can and I think most people have probably known couples who get this way. If you reach a certain stage in your life and you've been around couples who've been married 10 plus years but aren't really happy with each other,
Hmm.
for whatever reason they stay together, but you know these couples where they just, and individually as friends you're usually telling them you guys should probably not be married anymore.
Not be married or communicate differently.
Or yeah, you need to go to like, couples therapy with somebody good, or for whatever the option is. Whatever you're doing is terrible and isn't working, and you need to work on it.
Oh yeah, and I think one of the things that's kind
And
of
I think, yeah, like you said, I think it would have been perfectly fine to start this movie that way, because these are all things that give you, and it's, show don't tell.
mhm.
The ding on the phone, the like going through the motions, the dude watching the podcast as he's engaging with his wife because he's completely indifferent to it.
Yep.
This is a perfectly fine way to start this kind of movie, because with what comes later, it's okay to start in the third act of War of the Roses. What I didn't need was the crime scene set up
Yeah, because it
ahead of
kind of
time.
pulls away. It pulls away what your. I mean, I understand what the writer was trying to do, but it pulls away the the journey of that story at that moment because you're expecting one thing for the 90 pages. You're wondering, okay, well, how does this particular aspect of this story happen? Like, oh, here's some of the like we're not gonna spoil it, and even though it's in the first page, I don't want to spoil with like who lives or who dies in regards to this crime scene because that's
Well,
um
that's another major part. You
yeah.
basically make the rest of the movie a prequel to a set destination,
Yes.
which is, and when we complain about prequels, what is most often what we say? It's completely anticlimactic, because at least who's, most of the people who are going to end up coming out of this okay. And, like
Hmm.
when right now Mufasa is playing in theaters.
Yeah.
If there's scenes where Mufasa is going over a waterfall and is in danger, do I feel any real sense? No, because I know he has to live, because he has to be around for Lion King to be the father of Simba. So
Right.
I don't have any real stakes that Mufasa is going to be facing. And especially, with the way this movie is set up as trying to be mysterious, and especially by the end of the third act, really leaning into, even in the formatting of the script,
Hmm.
the mystery elements of it. Setting it up with that prequel style crime scene is, I think, a big mistake.
I would agree. And the other part too, like the only way you can kind of circumvent that aspect of the prequel is if the main characters of the original are actually the side and supporting characters of the prequel, because it's another story that they happen to be a part of, but it's not technically their story, right? So like that's kind of how you have to frame it, because that way it's not you're not paying attention to the main characters you're familiar with, and say for instance like Star Wars, like it's um, you understand that there'd be a Darth Vader, that there'd be an Obi-Wan Kenobi. They had a significant role to play, but if you were to sort of do a movie where maybe it was more Obi-Wan's story, or maybe it was not necessarily that. Sorry, if maybe it was just some other character story that Obi-Wan and maybe Vader or Anakin Skywalker were supporting characters in, and the results of that story lead to them being elevated to the main characters that would then become the following story. That way, you're more invested in the other characters that are introduced, and you can see essentially a passing of the torch in that story to the next one. And then because Star Wars is a passing of a torch from those characters to Luke and co, you've got three sets of relationships that you can be invested in at different stages.
Yeah,
It's
and
not an
the
easy thing
most
to balance.
I would say the most well received prequel of any of the Star Wars like for most of the Star Wars stuff, at least with Disney, was Rogue One, and it was because you were painting with a completely open canvas because nobody knew anything about these people.
Right.
You knew that somehow some rebel spies stole the Death Star plan. That's all you knew
Yeah.
from the movies. From all you got, the I think was it the general at the beginning of at the end of the New Hope doing the briefing, like we've stolen these plans. you know, the R2 unit got it here, so now we've got to take down the Death Star. So all you know is the plans got stolen. I mean, some other what is now Legends material had filled that in, but then was wiped away. So for most of the viewing public, it was completely fine. And there were real stakes because you could make it like, hey, nobody in that crew makes it out alive.
Yeah.
Like, because but they got their mission done. So you could do things like that. You didn't know who was going to live. Part of you was like, okay, well, these are the lead characters, so they'll at least get out. That'll be, nope, so there was real stakes. That's again,
Hmm.
if you're doing a prequel style thing, and I get like you talked about with the way the movie and the script ends up going, there's a reason why that crime scene is still kind of questionable. I still don't like it because it still at least eliminates certain elements if you're
Right.
checking the
Yeah.
boxes.
It basically narrows you to one outcome, and even trying to change it or alter it would then be a betrayal of what that setup was, and at the same time, it also doesn't allow you to say, "Oh, yes, that all adds up exactly as it should." I mean, it's. I personally think no, you can just toss that first page. You don't need it, and but and then go straight into the story because the heart of the story is actually like they build momentum. The writer builds momentum with these characters as things go. Things escalate in a very um, quirky way, and it's all yeah. It's what your point is very much all like early 2000s type of edgy stuff with trying to you know shock, do that shock and awe aspect of it. But the relationship that we see here is it's like both of them are complacent, and then right after that scene when they go back to listening to the podcast, and we go into the next morning, Jake is the guy cooking breakfast, and Emma's all dressed nice and fancy. She goes to work, and we find out that Jake is stay at home. He works from home as a teacher, and Emma is, I guess, into something of like real estate or construction.
Construction, allegedly, a high-end construction company.
And she's got one of those big open corner offices that are all glass windowed and walled off with glass and everything like that. She wears the fancy suits, um, and then
They also establish, and I actually like this part through subtle things like he's he's the caregiver type,
yeah,
which is he makes this nice breakfast for her and she says I got a meeting and drinks juice instead. Like one of those green
oh yeah, like
juice
the green
like
pluses or all the
yeah.
yeah.
And then she makes a note that she's laid out his clothes for him for the dinner they're going to have tonight because she's infantilizing him and child like he's a child who can't take care of himself. Like she controls things. You will wear what I tell you. You will be where I tell you. So and the script even says that she's the alpha of this relationship.
Right. Oh no, and she is. She's also the breadwinner. Um, everything that everything that you think is about these two characters, it comes across very quickly within the first couple of pages, which is actually really good because they're very we find their status positions relative to each other quickly defined, which is good. And we also think it's kind of funny. I mean, I also think it's kind of funny that she lays his clothes out for him like a mother would for a child, and and he feels very emasculated by that, and all of this is kind of like happening while he's doing he's teaching his online course. And Emma, what is she talking about? Well, she's talking with her girlfriend, who we don't know who this girlfriend is. We just know that she's got a girlfriend, and the girlfriend is trying to give suggestions that maybe Emma should just leave Jake. And Emma has the type of toxic attitude to a relationship, which is that she can't leave him because he would crumble apart and that would make me feel bad. um,
It's funny. I actually thought a better take on given her dynamic would have been he would get like she'd have to pay him alimony,
yeah, something that would cut deeper than just
which
yeah.
it goes to that gender role reversal. Basically, like I don't want to give him half of what I've earned
Hmm.
and pay him alimony. I think that would have been a better take with what we know of this character than not wanting him to fall apart without her.
Yeah,
That doesn't really get backed up by anything ever in this script.
that's right. Because I mean, even
Even
when
when we learn eventually why she even started dating him in the first place.
yeah, the reasons for them together are very flimsy. So like this early in the part of this early stage of the script, you're like, okay, I'm willing to entertain that idea, but then as things develop, you're like, well, this that line doesn't even actually hold true. So this made me raise the question, like, is Emma the type of person that just lies to her best friend and everyone for to save face, or is there something else going on here? And we kind of get a little bit of a taste of that. But even as she's talking to her girlfriend about, the whole we're in a bad marriage and then what happens if, you do get pregnant, and Emma's like, well, fortunately for her, her boss, James, comes into the office and she can end the call and then not dodge that question. But you've got this. I mean, what's really cool is that just in the action lines alone, in the scene description, as soon as James comes in, we get the idea that Emma is kind of bemused by him and flush and likes him, and even
I'll
though
be honest,
nothing,
this is the first time I've ever read an acronym BDE in a
yeah,
script before.
yeah,
So,
like they could have just
but
said
it was
cocksure
appropriate.
afterwards because
Yeah.
it's the same thing. It's kind of redundant, but yeah, like she's flush with him there, and he's just like, "We're still good for dinner," and her response, very professional, like, "You're the boss," and then it's back onto Jake, and then we go right into, um, I guess, the dinner itself. We meet, we have this dynamic between like Jake, James, Emma, and then James's wife Ashley, who's like half his age. They're talking about their two kids. But I thought was kind of funny is how Emma has in a scene description they regard that Emma is staring at her husband's outfit because even though she laid it out for him, somehow uh, Jake has managed to not wear it properly.
Which is a nice, because there's all sorts of things you can play around with as an actor with that kind of thing. Is it,
Yeah.
I think of Christopher Reeve playing Clark Kent,
Mm-hmm.
right? Where his mannerisms and, the way he just walked and talked and did things completely changed the way he carried himself, slouching, all that. Because it comes back as a reference again later from a different perspective when when we're not there yet in the script, but it is something. There is a payoff to this look and description here probably about in the middle of the second act
Yeah.
as well. And so I do like callbacks and payoffs, which are great. I I just these characters aren't likable, especially Emma
No,
is.
they're not. Like, I mean, this is that another part of that early 2000s edge, especially like writers from that era have, and a lot of early writers have this too, which is if we can come up with a main character, a couple of main characters that we know the audience is going to absolutely hate, we want to do that so that we can do the 180 and switch him into a character that you like. And I think the writer is trying to make Jake here the type of sympathetic character that we want to empathize with at first.
Yeah, he fails on that regard
No, no, he
too.
does
Yeah,
because
yeah, yeah. I get what you're saying though, where you come in almost like the where they have the epiphany or life change and things like that,
yeah, their call to action gets them up and going again.
which
Um,
is traditional storytelling, and I'm really cool with that. Like one of my favorite movies from the early 2000s, and it's kind of a callback, throwback to like It's a Wonderful Life was I think The Family Man with Nick Cage,
oh yeah, great
where
one. Yeah,
where he's getting, he gets it's the reverse isekai of It's a Wonderful Life.
yeah,
Instead of finding out what the world was like without him, he gets the glimpse of what the world is like, where he makes the choice to stay with his college sweetheart and have a family.
Yeah.
And he learns the value of like, look, I'm not a Fortune 500 CEO anymore, but yeah, like, oh, being a father is a reward in a whole different way, and I like that, to the point where, spoilers for a 20 plus year old movie now, he's very upset when he loses that glimpse that he was given,
Yeah.
and and feels that his life is not fulfilling now. It's got Scrooge elements too, with Christmas and things like that. But this is, where we go with this script, where you think, like, you think you're getting the forced perspective change to grow as a person. I think as we're going to go there and discuss it, the Freaky Friday reference was made.
Mhm.
So, and
Oh
that's
yeah,
what
we're
you
getting there.
normally would you expect with what the story's doing, and instead we get the edgelord kind of take on it.
Yeah, because this one was it's weird. So let's move along to that part here. So they finish dinner like with the boss with the wife's boss, and Jake tries to instigate a private moment with Emma, saying, "Hey, do you want to go to the bar across the street, get a nightcap?" And she's like, "No, she's not interested in that." And so they have this little conversation where he says, "Nah." He tries to capitulate, says, "Yeah, okay, I don't want to have one." And the next thing we know, he's at the bar. Alone across the street.
Yeah, she's home, he's at the bar.
He's at the bar, and the bartender is actually an old flame of Jake named Kate, who we find out is recently divorced. She's not in a great position in her life. She's living with a bunch of roommates half her age, but she got out of a bad marriage, and she's trying to turn her life around. And Jake is of course acting a little creepy to her, and so yeah, I mean, it's not the greatest type of conversation between them, but Jake basically just spends pretty much most of the night there just talking with her while she's doing her job. And there's this other guy, I can't remember what his name was, um, uh, Eddie, I think it was. Eddie was the guy.
Yeah, who comes up later. Like, we have an A and B story in the script.
Yeah.
And the A story is Emma and Jake, and the B story is Kate with Eddie a lot of the time.
Yeah, pretty much.
And until these storylines collide.
Until they
So,
collide, right?
yeah.
And so we find out with between Kate. Kate is like she's the innocent character here. She's the character that we are supposed to like. She's the one that the reason that her marriage didn't work is that she wanted kids and her ex-husband didn't. It's kind of stressful. Now she's in her early 30s and she's trying to get her life around, and she says the dating circuit's pretty horrible, and Jake is kind of trying to squeeze into that. And he ends up saying something along the lines of like how he doesn't want to divorce his wife, but he wishes she got like really terrible cancer so that they could have a few good positive moments before she's gone, and then he could start his life over again. I'm like, that's pretty dark, um, and quite telling for this character.
Yeah, it's there's so many awkward things about this whole interaction. Um, I don't know that it makes it. This is where the early part you're supposed to be, I guess, identifying with Jake,
Yeah, I think
maybe.
so, maybe.
And this part of it doesn't help you,
It
may
no,
because he gets creepy,
he gets
and
creepy, and then on top of that, like Kate uh, shares like one of the things that really collapsed their marriage is that she and her ex-husband tried a threesome with her and another guy, and it just completely fell through. But Jake assumes it was another woman, but then when she says it was another guy, that causes Jake to have a flash of his wife and James, her boss, at dinner, and it's something that kind of bothers him a bit, or at least so we kind of think. Like it gets a little complicated, right? Um, and what ends up coming up later is that they go through the motions. Next day, next morning, we find out that not only are Jake and Emma trying to have a kid, we also find out that Emma is actually secretly taking birth control pills. So she doesn't want to get
Yep.
pregnant.
So she's been basically scamming him.
Yeah, scamming him, keep stringing him along, or doing something until she feels like it's the right time. Um, but as we kind of move along, one thing that happens is like Jake and Kate, they start following each other, I guess, on Instagram, and then Jake does this creepy thing where he goes through her entire history and likes everything that she posts, which freaks out Kate a little bit. And then, while they're getting ready for, I guess, doing something else, I can't remember what it was they're doing, but Jake's just in the shower looking at pictures of Kate on his phone, pleasuring himself, and
By
when
the way, which was so the transition from that, which is the last thing we know he was looking at,
yes,
to what you get when the next scene, when the scene pops up next,
very different.
is very different, and it's jarring and doesn't make sense because like this is another like, almost it's like being set up in a horror movie
Right.
where you're expecting the jump scare from opening the door, and then you open the door and there's nothing there, and then the cat jumps out at you. It's like
Yeah, it was weird because Emma, like, she hears Jake in the shower and she tries to open the door to talk to him, but he's locked the door. So this is where we get a point where she gets out a bobby pin and she picks the lock. So we learn that she has a skill. She picks the lock, she opens the door, scares Jake. The phone falls into the shower, and the two are kind of fighting over it for a second. But she gets a hold of it, and instead of seeing Kate's Instagram on there, there's a video of cuck porn on it.
mm-hmm.
And this threw me off because I'm like, wait, is this like when he dropped it, he swiped on something random and it just kind of went that way, or and then because Emma's a little freaked out of it, and then so is Jake, and I was confused as like, is this Jake playing into the fact that he likes that, so she doesn't find out he was looking at Kate's Instagram?
That's the thing that doesn't make sense, right? If you are in the context of the story,
Mm-hmm.
if you are the unhappy husband and you're stalking your college in an old college flames Instagram, and to the point where you're self-gratifying to it, it
Yeah.
doesn't make sense to suddenly switch to the other type of self-gratification material because they're completely different ballparks of psychology.
Yes, because one is fantasizing about another woman, and the other one is fantasizing about someone with your spouse.
And which plays into factors of humiliation and degradation and things like that, which they talk about openly in the script.
Mm-hmm.
So it didn't make sense because if you're contemplating like the idea, the fantasy of making the move on the old college girl, that's totally that would be you would be
The cuck
you
stuff
would
would not
be
line up
the
with that. Yeah.
no the cuck in that scenario would be your wife
Right.
because you would be cheating on her. So that part didn't make, and it came out of left field. And then immediately, this is personality slash story red flag number umpteen for Emma
Yeah.
as she's confronting him, and he's like, "It's just porn, it's just porn." She's like, "I'm into it."
Do you? Yeah. She's like, do you want that? Do you want me to be, with another guy? And for the next like couple pages, when they're talking about this, I'm looking at this as he's just trying to save face and not admit that he's number one, that an old college flame has come back into his life, and number two, that he's fantasizing about her. So I'm like thinking, okay, this is the normal type of husband relationship of like, I don't want my
That's
wife to
yeah,
understand
that's
this one
I was
secret, so I'll go
expecting
to
it
more
to be a thing
embarrassing
where
one. Yeah.
he's getting stuck into an escalating problem because he doesn't want to admit the real thing, which was the confrontation, like that he's into the old
That
college
another
girl.
woman. Yeah.
And so it's one of those where he has to keep doubling down to keep the charade going. And part of me would be like, would Emma know that he's pretending, and they're both going to end up doing something they didn't neither one wanted to do
Right.
because neither one could give in. Again, very War of the Roses style.
Yeah,
But no,
because that's
no,
where they're digging their
100.
own hole here.
No, but we don't do that. We That would have been probably a better, more interesting thing to take. A comedic version of that would be, if anyone remembers the television show Friends, which a lot of people do.
Hmm.
There was the episode where everybody knew about Chandler and Monica
Right.
dating, but they didn't. Nobody wanted to say that they knew, so they were trying to escalate a fake thing where Phoebe was interested in Chandler to try to force everybody else to do it. And it just kept escalating and escalating beyond where they wanted to take it each side
Right.
because neither one would give in. And to that one, it was used to comedic effect very, very well. This one could have been used to dramatic effect to like really put the pressures on like the failings of the marriage, and might have been a more interesting route if they were a little more serious. But instead, this is where we start getting our Lynch turn. So,
Yeah, this is where we start getting into the weird part. So Emma tries to sort of suggest that if they do this, she could find someone from work. And of course, Jake is the first one to say, no, I don't want us to know who the person is. Can't we just find someone online? And that throws Emma off just a second, but then she says, yeah, okay, let's do that. And then the next thing we know, it's another day. We don't know exactly how we got to this point, but Jake and Emma are looking out their window as an old beater pulls into the driveway, and this giant man named Bull, comes out and basically goes over the details of what's going to happen. It's like, he tells Emma, "You go change, I go talk to Jake. You, me, Emma, we're together. Jake, you watch." And very simple. That's it. So Emma like gets up and she goes to change, and then we find out that Bull and Jake have a conversation, but we don't know what that is about. And so we then get into the bedroom where Emma is all ready to go. Bull is starting his thing, and Jake is in his, what I think is very pathetic to call it, but the watching chair. And so yeah, things start to get hot and heavy, and then Bull starts doing a chant in tongues, and then all of a sudden, Jake says, "No, I don't want this to happen." But before anything works, we get the Freaky Friday moment. And this is the big twist of the script. Happens on like 20 pages, where Jake's consciousness goes into Emma's body, and Emma's body goes into Jake's consciousness. So it's a body swap thing, and Jake is now on the receiving end of Bull, but in Emma's body. And then Bull just kind of vanishes in the ether, and now these two have swapped places. So, were you expecting that, little Chad?
I did not see it. No, I didn't see it coming at all. It was out of left field. Nothing in the story up to that point would make you think that was where we were going with it.
Right.
The the scenario that was set up, the the way the person who was involved beyond Emma and Jake acted seemed not at all to set that up either. I don't. It's I didn't
It's
expect it,
yeah,
to
it's
say the
a
least.
big surprise. It doesn't circumvent where the story was going. Um, it adds a new chaotic element to it, which I was like, okay, I'm willing to entertain this. And I will say this, it definitely gave an energy to the script that it didn't have before, because now we have a Freaky Friday problem in a dark movie about a bad marriage and infidelity, and it's happened at such a rate where Emma doesn't know what to do now that she's in Jake's body, and Jake doesn't know what to do now that he's in Emma's body, and they're having difficulty navigating that change. And and so they we get this little beat where, okay, they're stuck like this for now. They have to figure out what to do. Jake now has to go into work as Emma, and because they don't, Emma's job doesn't appreciate the remote stuff going on. So basically, Jake has to go in as Emma, and then Emma has to work through him remotely so that she can keep their job and they can figure out what to do next. And then the other part is they are now trying to find this bull guy so that they can switch back. And we don't know how they managed to find him in the first place, but apparently those avenues have all vanished, which I guess occurred online, right? If I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, there was the online, like his entire online history seems to go away, which again, this is where it's very Lynchy, where they don't even explain how that's possible ever. So don't expect a payoff on that.
Right.
This guy never comes back again, ever.
He doesn't come back again, but we do get, this is where we get another flashback within a flashback, because Jake in Emma's body finds in Jake's pants, his own pants, a little vial filled with a strange glowing liquid. And we flash back to Emma having left, and it's now Jake and Bull talking. And Bull says, like, after tonight, you will never see me again. And he hands him the glowing vial, and he says, for you to reverse. And Jake's confused. He's like, I don't know what that means, like, afterwards. And he's like, I don't get it. He's like, Bull says, you'll want to drink right away. Don't wait, explore. And now we come back to the present, and this is where Jake realizes, oh, this is what he meant. I'm now in my wife's body. She's in my body. I'll want to correct this immediately, but he says I shouldn't because, again, the reputation that Bull has provided is that every couple he has interacted with, the couple has come out better as a result. That's the premise that the screenplay is asking us to believe, and because of this twist, we're inclined to think, okay, yeah, we're following the Freaky Friday body swap arc. Usually at the end of those films, the two parties that have swapped bodies, they come to understand each other better and they unite, and then they have a better life afterwards. This one is that same premise with a little bit of sex to instigate the transformation, as opposed to, say, A Wish, or what's that one with was it Ryan Reynolds and Jason Bateman, where they swapped?
Jason Bateman,
yeah,
was
they
it
swapped because they peed in the same fountain or something.
yeah. The body change, or so the body change movies have a proud history of not needing to explain the magic because they're usually comedies.
Mm-hmm.
They're usually prefaced on like a whimsical just setup, and people are okay with doing that with just like, oh, it's magic, right? In a whimsical comedy type thing.
Right.
If your setup is some dude coming in to rail your wife, I think you need to do a little more explaining. but
that's like the Lynchian aspect to this. It's like, yeah, David Lynch would probably do something like this for a body swap. He probably would make it as part of a cuckold thing.
Yeah, which brings up the fact that they were 100%. The dude did it. It wasn't like he, just set them up, did his chanting, and then swapped them before he engaged in the activity. Activity was happening.
Climax was removed because they were swapped, but the activity was happening. Now the other part too, and this goes into like this was something like, again, one of the aspects of the cuckold is that the person who's being cucked still enjoys it because they get off on the humiliation. It's not the same as, say, being tied to a chair and watching your wife cheat on you, and because to be cucked and to be a cuck are not the same thing. So that's one. Mm-hmm. I mean, and this script kind of distinguishes that because Jake himself, he's caught in between. He kind of liked the fantasy, or at least he seemed to have liked it, but then he goes back on it, and by the time he goes back on it, that's when the swap happens. So that made me go back. So like, okay, well, was this still all part of his I guess secret of not wanting to reveal that he was fantasizing about another woman, and this is how far he took it, and now he's regretting it, and he's stuck here, and now they're in this situation? Or was this also an underlining aspect kink of him? Like, we don't know until we get to this next big part of the story. where after after they go they try to go back to their normal lives with Jake as Emma going into work. And so I'm sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself because again, this does jump around a little bit, guys. But so yeah, Jake and Emma, they're in each other's body. We jump ahead 1 week later, and they're at the police station trying to get a sketch artist to put up to basically draw what Bull looks like so they can try and find him because they can't find him anymore. And then they end up having to go to their respective jobs. So one of the things I thought worked in the comedic sense of it is that Emma's and Jake's routines, their habits still are holding through. So like when Jake in Emma's body gets out of the shower, he throws his towel around the waist, but he's in Emma's body, so it's not the same. And then of course Emma is trying to navigate the male requirements, and she makes a comment about how stupid it is to pee standing up, and so forth. So they're trying to figure each other's bodies out now as part of the trope, and it's done in a little bit more of a vulgar way than you'd expect. But Emma is basically now that she's in Jake's body, you have to imagine like, oh, we're now seeing an alpha male finally in the Jake form, and he is picking out her clothes, picking out the clothes that she's going to wear, putting on her makeup, basically forming her into like, this is how you're going to behave when you go to work, and then of course leaving him saying, "Don't get me fired." And so the next big reveal is Jake goes to Emma's office, and he's in the office and he's all ready to go, but one thing he can't do is he can't figure out a way to pull off this ruse because his office is completely open. Everybody's going to see him either on the phone or talking with his wife about how to do the job. But before he even gets to that, her boss, James, comes into her office, and they start to fool around a little bit, and that's when Jake learns that his wife has been cheating on him for who knows how long.
And we also learn, and it's kind of on a side note, but we learn more about her as a terrible person.
Yes.
Because from this incident, we learn it was her idea. Because remember earlier, we had dinner with him and his wife,
right,
before Jake went to the bar and met Kate. But we find out that it was Emma's idea because they wanted to basically throw their affair in their respective spouses' faces, basically to make them wallow in shame they were
and uncomfortableness, or at the very least make them not believe it was really a thing happening.
Yeah.
Because it's like it'd be too obvious, right? So the whole tipping your hat to play on two outcomes, both of which would be satisfying to James and Emma.
And it's such a special kind of jerk, like to really want to like you. Not only are you having an affair, but one of the things we like about it, and this really plays into the fact that one of the themes of this script basically is that Emma is a sadist.
Yes.
And James is I guess a psychological masochist.
Yeah, he's definitely.
But
yeah.
it's open to interpretation a little bit.
Well, what's weird is that as Jake starts to get power in Emma's body, like he starts to develop confidence. Because as soon as, first of all, he goes through the anger part where he calls out his wife for cheating on him, and she does it for him. She doesn't do it because she's sorry about Jake or anything. She does it because she's selfish and she wants to do it. And this stimulates Jake into doing something kind of I thought was kind of clever, because he goes to the bar as Emma. He introduces himself to Kate again, and then he basically says, "This is what's going to happen. I am going to kill my lover, and then I'm going to confess. And I want you, Kate, to reach out to my husband and be there for him because he's going to need someone strong like you in this time. And it's a weird conversation, but I like the irony to it because number one, it doesn't make Jake look like a good person. Number two, Kate is receiving it exactly as a normal person should receive this information. But we also have that irony is that we know Jake knows how to switch this back and Emma doesn't. So you have this like, oh, this is kind of like a perfect plot setup, a perfect get out of jail free card, perfect murder type of thing, all that type of stuff. Even at the end when Jake's, as Emma says, after I confess, I might be in jail or I might be in a psych ward because I'll probably say some really crazy things after the fact that nobody will believe. And Case is like, oh yeah, I think that'll probably track correctly. and I'm thinking, okay, this is some active behavior for Jake that the script kind of spent a couple of pages suggesting it would never be something he would do, but now that he's doing it and he's got it all plotted out and he lays out what the plan is, you're thinking, oh, good for you, Jake. You're getting your own sort of twisted justice on your cheating and manipulative wife.
We also, and I'm trying to remember exactly where it was placed, but I think there was a very awkward um, moment. I guess I shouldn't say moment, but after he confronts Emma in his body
Mm-hmm.
with the affair, that there's one of the most awkwardly, I guess, framed interactions between a husband and wife on screen where Emma in Jake's body aggressively.
Oh yeah, this happens when Jake returns home. Emma and Kate,
Yeah.
Emma and James. Well, yes,
Yeah, because Jake confronts Emma about the affair,
yeah,
and Emma proceeds to basically dress him down, call him a coward, sniveling, all those little things, and basically reinforces that isn't this what he wanted though, because he's into that. And then she aggressively, in a male, as she is now in a male body, forces herself
yeah.
on him in her body, and it's just it comes off as not just mean, but like, I mean, again, this movie is trying to be dramatically edgy this way,
Oh yeah,
but it's such a terrible scene as written. It's I mean, it's aggressive. I mean, you're basically seeing SA on screen the way
yes.
it's written.
Oh yeah,
And
and you have to remember it's a woman's soul inside of a man's body abusing her own body and at the same time abusing her husband. It's really messed up.
yeah, so and that reinforced, and then from there, Jake, it further reinforces his plan to, to enact his revenge, I guess.
Essentially framing his wife for murder. And
So that he can be done with her. Like,
yeah, because basically he's saying I'm going to trade in my wife for Kate. And here's the thing that's kind of I also appreciate the additional irony here. Jake thinks he's going to get Kate after he as Emma has revealed this stuff, but Kate has already said nope. I don't want this. I'm blocking it, and she ends up leaving a voicemail saying like whatever it is that you're going through with your wife, you got to deal with it on your own. I don't want to be a part of it. I'm washing my hands of it. Don't contact me anymore. And you're like, oh, good for Kate. Just yeah, get away from this crazy stuff. And this message, I guess, is happening as Emma has already made arrangements with James to go up to the cabin, and we find out that Emma has actually purchased a secret cabin that Jake had no knowledge of, really, or not, or kind of. I guess he had a vague knowledge of, but not what the purpose of it was actually for. But this is apparently where Emma would take James to for their nights together. And so yeah, James apparently picks up James drives Emma's car to the cabin, and they're kind of talking as they're getting ready for all this type of stuff. And James ends up putting on the lingerie that Emma was wearing when Bull came over to really like rev up James's engine. And then, of course, when Jake Lee, this is going to be confusing, guys, because again, we're going to be saying Jake, but you have to remember he's in Emma's body, and they have it framed this way in the script, like Jake and in parentheses as Emma, and then Emma in parentheses as Jake.
So
And
confusing.
it gets confusing. But
Yeah.
essentially, what ends up happening is like Jake as Emma, he goes to change into sexy outfit. When he returns to the living room, James is doing what's called I don't know if it still sticks around, but I remember back in the day it was called the naked man, where as soon as the girl left, you as the guy would strip off your clothes, take a position, usually sitting, ideally sitting on the couch, and then when she would return to the room, there you are, and you're all together, and that is supposed to be the conveyance of, oh, let's get intimate, and that's what we got here, and I think, and and Jake gets a sense like, oh, this is going to be a lot easier than he expected, but it doesn't. But it's still awkward for him because again, he's this straight male in his wife's body, trying to seduce, well, easily seducing James, but he's a little apprehensive, and Jake has managed to basically hide on, I guess, in the straps of his bra behind him, a 12-inch chef's knife,
Yeah,
and
that was awkward framing. Yeah, but I guess James was not paying attention to that, which
well,
I can see was understandable.
I think James was just the way that the script describes is that his hands were nowhere near her back. Very focused on the
Yep.
front.
This is another thing. So, in reading the script, in the way they do a lot of these encounters and the
Hmm.
descriptions of these encounters, either they're going to have to shoot around it way different than the writer intended for some of these scenes,
Hmm.
because as written, this is an NC-17 easily.
Oh yeah, this is Basic Instinct and then some. Because
Like this is beyond showgirls level of nudity. We've got we've got the essay elements. I mean there's all sorts of things
we,
where
yeah,
because of that the ratings board would never let this fly with an R.
yeah, they would not. I mean, well, I don't. Well, the ratings board wouldn't let it fly, but this movie would definitely have a home on streaming, if it were to be made.
Oh, that's true. I always forget that they don't even need to
They
rate
don't need to,
themselves.
but one of the things that's crazy here is that so Jake uh, does a Lorena Bobbitt on James, which is the best thing I could do, um, and then slices his throat and then stabs him repeatedly, and yeah, murders James right then and there. And just as he's kind of coming down from this high, Emma in Jake's body shows up, and the reason that she's there is because she tracked his phone, uh, and so she knew what he was doing. And then now that they have this dead body here, and Emma realizes that Jake was going to frame her for murder. It's this is where Emma kind of realizes that Jake has a means to switch them back, and Emma refuses to let Jake do that, and so they the two kind of form a strange alliance of sorts where they decide to get rid of uh, James's body and figure out another way to go from here. And I thought this part here was a little bit weak. I wanted to get your opinion on this as well because while Emma is there, she's not really in Jake's body. She's not really doing anything to kind of implicate him enough to be part of the murder yet because it's got Emma's DNA everywhere, blood on her body, all the tropes are still heavily leaning on Emma's side as being the murderer, even though Jake did it, but not so much Jake. What were your thoughts with regards to this kind of reveal and scene and their plan of disposing the body together?
Yeah, I mean, I could understand because right now Emma is in quote unquote Jake's body.
Hmm.
So it made perfect sense that she knew based on all of the evidence that she was effed.
Yeah.
So, the interesting thing was she figured out like you've got an escape plan because you're not this stupid. Also because they listened to, they laid the groundwork with them listening to all the true crime podcasts. So she knew going into the door that she was effed, and it was figuring out that he had some kind of escape plan.
Mm-hmm.
And then he's running to the bathroom where he, I guess the script never mentioned this that I can remember, where he stashed
The
the
the magic potion, yeah.
the magic potion, because why would we establish things? Um, this is
Well, we know
it
that
was
he
just
has it the
frustrating.
entire time. We just don't.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it would have been nice if like he's changing, like when he clearly got there and changed into the lingerie and
Mm-hmm.
then put the knife in there. So I guess maybe I missed it. It's possible that they mentioned that he put it in the medicine cabinet in the bathroom, but that's where it was.
Mm-hmm.
So he had locked himself in there, and this is another callback. The script had established that Emma had the knowledge on how to pick locks so she could get in, and she got in. And as she's holding him hostage in her body, she sees him glance at the medicine cabinet, and that's when we get the reveal that he could have changed, that she now finds out also they could have changed bodies from the beginning,
Yep.
gone back to, their original bodies. But that's when, yeah, we're all of a sudden out of left field completely. They decide to suddenly do couple things with disposing the body. It didn't really jive that that they would be, um, it didn't fit for me. it, like,
It felt. I mean, I understood the surface level logic of it. Oh, she's got now that Emma has the potion. She's not going to let Jake switch bodies and then implicate her. So this is, she's now in charge. But really, it's now that now she's holding herself hostage in her husband's body, and until she can figure out a way to get rid of this, she's got to play along, right? And I'm like, okay, I kind of get that. I just don't. I think they're
on the other hand, it would have been, I think there was sufficient groundwork to maybe go a different direction with where she gets the magic potion and is just going to leave because, she's true crime podcast and she knows she doesn't have any evidence. The only evidence of her being there would be explainable that it's his wife's cabin.
right.
And so he's going to have certain trace evidence that will be there. But in terms of the murder and everything else, leave and then take the magic potion with you, because I think there is sufficient groundwork to say she's like, I like being a man. I
Yeah,
like having the power. I like being in charge. Like I like the body. I like the physicality. There's something that could play to her alpha role. And maybe now he's effed because he had done this meticulous planning all based on just being able to take the magic potion and switch back to being her. I mean, switch back to being himself.
hmm
But now she's got it, and she's not letting him. So he's on the hook in her body for everything.
and he's gonna be stuck there. Well, like hypothetically, if the police come and arrest her and all that type of stuff, there's um, nothing he
I
can do at
was
this point. Yeah,
Yeah, I was really going more for a death becomes her kind of scenario out of this
yeah,
than where it would have made more sense where they just hate each other, and by some twisted series of events after their conflict they have to work together.
yeah.
This was not enough, forcing them to work together. They just decided, okay, well, we're both in on it now. Let's do this.
Yeah, it kind of came a little bit too easy. But again, the twists don't stop there because so Emma and Jake agree to work together. They gather up the pieces of James in a blanket, wrap him up, and then they drag him out to the middle of the woods, and they try to dig a grave for him, but it just doesn't work. The ground is frozen. It's too difficult. They've been at it for a couple hours. Nothing is working. And then Jake gets the idea of, hey, why don't we use the magic juice and put a little bit inside of his mouth and see what happens, because they have no other option right now. They just can't leave the body there. It'd implicate Jake and Emma, and they know it will switch something, but they just don't know how it works. So they just take a guess, really. And I'm like, it's it's really kind of contrived reason for them to get there. I mean, it's hard for me to grasp how it would work. In the way, like how they would come to that idea as like a last resort, as opposed to just, I don't know, building a fire and then burning the body and just letting it smolder for a while there, and then figuring something out afterwards. I don't know. Like they don't. There's no other options they explore. They kind of get to the whole. Let's just pour a small amount into James's mouth and see what happens, right? And I was thinking, okay, this is another big leap that stretches credulity, but at the same time, we've already got a body swap in here to begin with, so it's not really out of place essentially with the kookiness of this story. And I'm trying to, like, weigh both perspectives
Yeah,
here.
I mean, I think that part of it, this is the first time we're establishing the rules of the body swapping,
Yeah.
which basically seems to just be proximity based, where you drink the juice, or in this case, get a little bit of the juice, and you'll swap with the closest. And in this case, a dead body swaps with a dead body, and so a live body would swap with a live body. That's the explanation.
So that part is what I think causes some strain with this premise, because you would think that the potion is directly connected to the two people that have swapped. And as soon as they put a little this bit of this into James's mouth and he swaps with another corpse, you're like, well, that just means it swaps, yeah, to your point, with anyone in proximity, which means if Jake in Emma's body took that potion, had Emma not shown up, who or where would he swap with, and what would happen afterwards? Because it wouldn't have been Jake. Like we reading it would assume it'd be Jake, but after this new reveal, we now assume we now have an understanding that might not be the case, right? So it's a little confusing.
Yeah, and it worked out for the sake of the story.
Yeah.
It worked, I guess. Fine. So and this is where we find out, because of this is the callback to the True Crime podcast, that they knew this was a body from that serial killer 40 years ago that had never been found. So they're very confident that wherever the body went of the person they killed, in this case James, would be somewhere that the police would never find it, because they had actively searched for this body for 40 years and never found it.
Now here's the other thing that's kind of interesting, right? So only with Jake and Emma do the souls switch, but the bodies remain in the same place. But because they put it into a dead body of James, his body, technically his
Actually
body shouldn't be
swapped.
swapped. It should just
Yeah.
decompose to a higher degree, right? But that's not what we have here. Apparently, because what ends up paying off is that the police find that body and they identify it as one of the victims of the serial killer, and not James. But it should be James, because the body doesn't change position, just the spirit within or the life force or whatever does. So it's I mean, the rules are a little spotchy now.
That's true, because later in the script, yeah, and nowhere else, only with dead bodies, apparently, will it actually swap the position of the body,
Right.
which is a pretty big loophole problem,
Yes. So,
because every other time this, we see this, it's always just swapping, like Freaky Friday style. The soul passes across the room to
the
wherever
soul
the
passes
other
across
bodies.
room, but the bodies don't change physical
Yeah.
positions. Yeah.
So now we've got the police find this other body, and it's no big deal because they knew who the killer was. They've been looking for it for 40 years. Yay.
Jake
But
and Emma clean up the cabin, and in doing so, reignite some sort of crazy lust for each other.
yeah,
And
so they end up having passionate and loving relations
for around a
post.
month, I think.
Yeah. And apparently it puts them on the same page for at least a month. we the next I guess the next part of the script is finding is Kate. We cut to Kate again,
Hmm.
this to our B storyline, where she's seeing news footage of James as a disappear. No, she sees on social media that Emma, quote unquote, has posted a please help find my boss because he's missing.
Missing thing on Instagram, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
he's a missing person. Please help us. He's missing. And now that triggers something because obviously the last time Kate saw quote unquote Emma was when Jake and her body went to the bar and confessed his plan to murder her affair partner that she works with, and then confessed to it. So this, because she's actually a rational, seemingly semi-intelligent person, these are not like Sherlock Holmes level deductions
No,
to
they're
put
not.
together that this happened exactly when she said that that confession was happening. So she thinks that Emma murdered James and has gotten away with it,
Hmm.
and so she goes to visit James's widow, who we met earlier. I think her name was it Ashley.
Was that is Ashley? Yeah.
Yeah, so Ashley, and this is actually one of the most rational conversations in the entire script as well, where we have basically a trophy wife
Yes.
who when Kate comes in to confess that she thinks Emma killed her husband and was having an affair with him, she's completely indifferent to this confession because she had a prenup. She knew he was cheating on her constantly. Post his disappearance, there's been a steady string of girls and women coming to her confessing to affairs. And so she's completely indifferent to the idea of trying to out him as a murder victim because in the eyes this is crazy, it's a rational thing. She's like, to my children, I want him to just be an a-hole who left us so they can hate him
Right.
instead of a martyred murder victim so they worship him.
Which is pretty dark. And this also raised another question. I mean, he had to have a really good prenup if he could get away with infidelity, and she couldn't. Because
Well,
usually
I mean,
infidelity is kind of like the triggering aspect that voids prenuptial agreements. Um,
I'm sure. I mean, I don't know about. Mainly, we hear about prenups and things out of California, which has different rules. So maybe
mhm.
in Wisconsin, there's ways where it's basically, ironclad division of assets. No matter what the circumstance, you get nothing.
Right.
Now, she did have two kids. I will tell you that the one thing prenups usually can't address because it's not legally allowed is child support. So if she divorced and this is why a lot of athletes, people will try to get kids with the athlete
Hmm.
because child support is completely uncontractual, so they will be able to go to court and get 10, 20, 30 grand a month in child support, so they can, you know, keep the child into a lifestyle that which they've been coming. Either way, it rang very true to me that she was a very self-aware trophy wife
Hmm.
and didn't like actually her husband at all because she knew how unfaithful he was. Clearly, he liked to revel in it.
Yeah.
So it makes perfect sense that she would be well aware of his philandering.
And it wasn't just with Emma that he was with, which makes him even more of a jerk. Like it's not enough that he's just with one woman; he's got like one for every day of the week.
Yeah. So I liked the idea that she was because I like this is actually a rational woman making choices for herself and her children. So she wants no part of Kate's, Sherlock Holmes finding the real killer element.
Yeah, in fact, she's discouraging him for doing it just for what you said. She wants her
Mhm.
kids to like her more than their father. And if Kate does blow this up, well, guess what? Yeah, Ashley's gonna be stuck having to live a lie with her kids because their kids have this fantasy about their father that has been that exists as a byproduct of Kate's meddling, so to speak. And this is the one thing that kind of threw me off a little bit too, is that Kate is involved, gets herself involved in this after she had left that voicemail saying that she doesn't want any part of it. And I think it would have been a bit more interesting if we got just something extra, something like that, like Emma with her pickpocketing skill, something with Kate and her compassion, so that even if she wouldn't leave such a voicemail. Instead, she would just say, "Hey," instead of me leaving a voicemail saying I don't want any part of it, don't talk to me again. Be more encouraged, like, listen, if you need someone to talk to, maybe go see a marriage counselor. I know people. You can come to me. I can help you. Like, be a bit more engaging in that regard, because then I would understand. Okay, so Kate is an empathetic character, and even though Jake kind of freaked her out a little bit, there's a history there. We don't want, and she doesn't want to just abandon him right away now that she's kind of rebuilding her own life. That would have made more sense, but they kind of divorced her from that storyline like 20 pages ago, and then now they're bringing her back, and I feel like that's a little bit of a betrayal. That could probably have been reworked a little better, because the rest of the story is now quite dependent on Kate investigating what happened to James and what is really going on between Emma and Jake.
Exactly. This is where we now fall into Kate as a amateur detective
Yeah,
deciding, and this is where Eddie, her partner at not partner, but
her
her
coworker.
coworker at the bar is constantly telling her, "Don't get involved." Like you make a point of talking about how you just got out of a toxic marriage and toxic relationship, and you don't need this stuff. So it's simple: don't get involved. Don't don't do this stuff. And so but somehow she continues to do it. She goes to the cabin
Tell us
to
tell us about the cabin scene, because this is another, like, again, this script has a number of escalating moments and twists to it. So
yeah. So she decides to go to Emma's cabin to try to find evidence because that's near where they found the body from that other killer 40 years ago. So Kate decides that must be where they were killing people, which, I mean, that is a very interesting just jump. But so
yeah,
she goes to the cabin to try to find evidence. She breaks into it. Well, no, she finds an open window in the bathroom.
no, the front door is unlocked, which she thought
Oh,
was
the front door.
weird. And as she's investigating, she hears somebody approach and then hides into the bathroom and locks the
Okay,
door.
that's what it was. All right. So while she was investigating, she finds like a very trivial blood spot. Apparently, that's the only thing they didn't manage to clean up. And she overhears Emma and Jake talking about how once they switch back, things will be fine.
But
Yeah, and
Emma,
somehow from
as
that, she
yeah,
extrapolates that it's they're gonna murder again or something.
that they're probably going to kill again. The other part is that while she's listening to this and trying to film it on her phone, Emma and Jake are going at it again until Jake starts to get nauseous, and he, in Emma's body, makes a run for the bathroom, and that's when the door's locked, and then that triggers curiosity between both of them, and so we get this tense scene where Kate opens up the bathroom window, and she has to try and find a way to hoist herself out and over, and it's this kind of urgent part because Emma's got the bobby pin and she picks a lock and she gets inside, and boom, Kate's not there. She's toppled out and she's found on the other side. She's safe, but then we realize that Jake in Emma's body is now pregnant. This causes them to hold back on their ability to swap bodies because they do not know what's going to happen to the child if they switch bodies.
Not to mention, again, I think it's being insinuated that Emma in Jake's body is much happier being a man than she was being a woman.
Yep.
And because she doesn't want to have to give birth, she doesn't want to have to go through pregnancy. We know from earlier in the script that she was taking steps to not be pregnant ever.
And Jake didn't know that, so he wasn't
Yeah.
continuing those steps as they were, hooking up all the time.
Yep. And it makes sense that he wouldn't know that he should be taking the birth control since he didn't know that in his mind she was off birth control.
Right. So, I mean, and then one of the things that's kind of interesting is that, Jake's saying, like, okay, so after the baby, we'll switch back. And Emma says, yes, after we'll switch back. and then Jake tries to say, well, how about just before the birth? And Emma's like, no, God, no, f no, because she doesn't want to go through that that experience. And I thought, okay,
No.
that's interesting. That reinforces the fact that she is feeling more comfortable in a man's body than she was in her original body, and Jake's personality is kind of fitting more into the feminine aspect of this.
It's interesting twist. Like we got twists within twists, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah, and but this what really is weird to me is that this pregnancy scenario, which allegedly they were both happy about, leads to the idea in Emma's head within Jake's body that, you know what? I should get a chance to murder somebody
Yeah.
because you got the thrill of murdering somebody, of, bobbiting James and then murdering him. It feels like I got left out. I would like to murder somebody and have that thrill.
Yes, because they're taking the whole experience, each other's shared experiences, to um, literally an equity level, where it's like, oh, you killed somebody, well, I need to kill somebody now. That's how we become even, and that goes into another aspect with when it comes to like damaged marriages, is that when infidelity occurs, it's like, well, if you got to sleep with somebody, I should get to sleep with somebody, because that's how you kind of cancel each other out, and that's a very twisted way to look at it. But I think it's kind of fascinating the fact that Emma is the one to posit this, even though she's been cheating on her husband for, I don't know, I'm going to assume years. So it's still even not
I
true.
would say, I mean, honestly, I would think the way the script is reads and what we information we get, it probably goes back to the inception of their relationship,
Oh, I would not be surprised. Yeah.
which
Um,
was back to college for them.
Goes back to college, which is like, like 8 to 10 years ago ish. So yeah, it's been a pretty horrible relationship they have. But this idea that Emma brings up starts them on to the whole, okay, yeah, let's go do this. And how is it done? Well, it's not Jake going to seduce a woman and Emma going to kill her. No, it's back to Jake in Emma's body seducing another guy that Emma is going to kill. So it's still not even equal, right? Because again, Jake killed a fellow man who was taking event who his wife was cheating with, and now Emma is going to kill another man that her husband, quote unquote, would be potentially cheating with. It's the dynamic is a little off there, but
And from a story standpoint, here's the other thing. So, I think I've talked about the never have your character do something that they can't come back from.
mhm,
So, with James, the script had laid out a predicate that he was a bad person, that he was completely good with destroying marriages in this case.
mhm,
So, and since Jake was in Emma's body, it gave you a sense of possibly, Old Testament justice in what he was doing.
yeah, pre
So,
Hammurabi Code.
yeah, I mean, it's not right, but it also makes it so that the audience can accept it better.
Mhm,
Whereas now, where they're talking about just killing someone randomly, a more innocent person. Now, the way the script sets it up with using Emma's body as bait, and then I guess we find out the part where we do get in the script that they do tell this person that she is married. So it's supposed to somehow put some sin on him
right.
for philandering with a married woman.
Yeah, for enabling the act of infidelity. Like,
Yeah,
yes, it's
but
being
I
posited to
still,
him, but he's not pushing it away. He's embracing it. Yeah.
yeah. So, but I don't think it's as now they do, and this is why I
They
think
then
there's a
escalate it.
moment
Yeah.
they do escalate it later in the encounter to make sure that you're okay with this person being eliminated.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. They do. Because like they set up the plan. They tell this guy, this strange guy who's new to town, first day at this bar, whatever. He basically says, "Okay, come to my house. This is the address. Take a cab, pay in cash, call from a payphone to get the cab. Turn your cell phone off." It's like all of these things are red flags. Two is like, I think I'm going to be murdered. And then the next red flag is he comes into the house and there's plastic all over the furniture and ground and floor. It's a kill box, essentially, out of Dexter.
Hmm.
And of course, Jake in Emma's body says, I expect us to get messy tonight. And he's, of course, this Nick guy is taking it in the more seductive way. And it ends up getting, not necessarily, it ends up going a little further than Jake is comfortable with. Like, no actual intercourse occurs, but some physicality gets there. And it gets to the point where there's almost, again, another essay. And that's only when Emma and Jake comes in with a knife and stabs the guy in the back of the head. And the fact that Emma waited so long to do this really put a lot of scare in Jake. Because in Emma's body, he's not as strong as he was as a man, and vice versa for Emma in Jake's. So you've got this kind of power struggle between the two, the change dynamic, where it's not just now the attitude. Now we're actually like we're reinforcing the fact that the strength is and the manipulation is now far more dangerous with Emma in Jake's body than we ever have seen before.
Yeah, and if you wanted to send like all the red flags that this person is actually a sociopath, this is,
Yeah, this
you're doing
solidifies
it.
it.
Yeah, and this is the part where the script constantly does the nonlinear quick flashback, right? Because
Yeah,
now we get the flashback that Kate was at the bar
yeah.
that they went to,
That they went to,
and
witnessed what Emma, Jake, and
yeah,
did.
yeah, saw Jake, Emma and Jake's body watching as Emma, which was Jake and Emma's body, picked up this dude and left, and then saw Jake's stand up and leave.
Right.
So she's again not having to be a rocket scientist based on what she had assumed happened to James, thinking that they're about to murder again. So she follows them back to
Their
their
house. Yep.
house, and this is when she gets on the phone and calls her friend Eddie again, and is telling him what's happening, and he's like, "Stop! Just stop and get out." She won't.
Hmm.
So she continues to tell them. She sees them wrap the body up in their Dexter kill box materials to take it out somewhere, and she follows them
Hmm.
because this is apparently what she does now. And so they're going to a frozen lake or frozen river where there's apparently bodies get dumped a lot.
Somehow, yeah.
So, or I guess it's known. Maybe it's like an old mob place. So they use the magic potion and then this again, where the only two times this happens this way in the entire script, the dead bodies swap places, and like a really decomposed old body that had been on the floor of the river or ocean
Or lake or
lake,
something,
whatever
yeah.
whatever it was, comes to the top of the ice. Kate sees this and is completely freaked out, but she makes noise, and so she's discovered,
And knocked out.
and she gets knocked out as Jake and Emma are now gonna have to figure out what to do about Kate.
Right, because Kate is someone that they know, so they can't just kill her. Um, and their plan is to do more with the body swap, and that's as far as we're going to take it here, because not only does it get very confusing, but it is literally like the spoiler of all the twists and turns and the payoffs for this script. And it's
Yep.
I will say this, it does require more than one read to grasp.
I will also say that it's super unsatisfying to me. I mean, I don't want to. We're gonna stop and not do anything that is now considered probably mega spoilers, but I just, I just felt no connection, joy, or real response to how it ended.
Yeah, it felt
It felt,
vacuous.
yeah, it felt vacuous. It also felt like unearned,
Hmm.
and I also, to me, again, without doing the spoilers, since we're going to talk about it, I thought it was kind of like the worst ending in a way because of how it was done. I mean, and discussing any of the major of the specific points on why I was very dissatisfied would be major spoilers, so we're not going to do it. But I just will leave it at that, and then once people read the script, I think they may be able to understand reading between the lines what I'm getting at.
Yeah. Um, I will say this: with this script as it was written, I kind of understand why it placed as high as it did. Um, because there's constant escalation to the conflicts here between the characters. Emma, the only one that I don't buy is the whole Emma wanting to murder part. That part there felt very very thin. Um,
I think I think they thought, and this is again where I brought it up, that by giving in the indications of her masochist, not masochist, sadist
mhm.
tendencies, that it would make sense that she would be jealous of not being able to be the ultimate sadistic person and murder.
Right.
But it clearly shows, I mean, number one, the person who was murdered was her longtime affair partner, that you would think a regular person, if they're having an affair, would have some kind of emotional connection to.
Hmm.
But instead, what we are revealed, and this is why I use the word sociopath, that Emma seems to not really have any genuine emotional connection to anybody. And so maybe this was the writer thinks that they were, that it's an easy jump to think that, okay, this person's true nature is revealed and they were always a killer. They just didn't take the steps because they didn't want the consequences.
Yeah, that they weren't in a position to get away with it. Now they are.
Yeah. And given a magic potion that lets them get away with murder, this is all this person can think about and wants to do. And not just stopping at the one. So,
Yeah. So I mean, I will say that's one of the big hangups I had with this script is that this part of the escalation didn't make much sense. I think just exploring more with the fact that Jake in Emma's body is pregnant was good to kind of dwell on. They could have spent another beat on that more, um, because I think that's all the other beats, all the other changes. They actually give us 5 or 6 pages about, oh, this is happening now, this is a thing. But it's almost like instantly, as soon as we find out that these two are pregnant, it's now, oh, Emma's like, now I want to kill a guy. Um, and it just it felt like it was tempering the ramifications of now Jake having to experience life growing inside of his body. There's all these other aspects that they could have that I was hoping the writer would explore in a different dynamic that would help make Jake kind of rise to the occasion, but that never really occurred. And I think that has to do with the fact that this script starts with Emma essentially as your main character for the first half and then switches over as Kate as the main character for the second half.
and
And
then,
and
and
that's a
Emma is
jarring
not
narration.
likable.
No, Emma's not
Yeah.
likable at all.
And Kate is also okay, but we don't really get enough to, I mean, I think the writer believes by laying the groundwork of Kate not having any good reason aside from helping innocent people to do this to try to give that the hero
Hmm.
treatment. But I just she was, and I don't want to because this it seems mean to say this. She was boring,
No, she was. She was
and
thin, boring.
yeah, not thin apparently because we got described to her as a Zatfig girl, which was another kind of interesting throwaway thing. Um, to me, what I would do with this kind of the with this concept, I would actually get rid of the magic potion, get rid of the body swapping. I would retool this to be like a streaming series, completely take Kate out of the equation, and just focus on Emma and Jake as a couple who has problems, who think where Jake somehow kills the affair partner. They dispose of the body, they get away with it, and it starts them on a path of escalating crime as a way to cover the flaws in their marriage.
Yeah. I
I
mean,
think
it's
that
a,
would be a more interesting kind of take. And but you'd need a whole season to kind of let that breathe and kind of expand on it. You don't want to that's a lot to cover in 2 hours.
I mean that's also a vastly different different
Yeah.
premise than this one here, but that is also, I mean, that's like a little bit of a mix of Dexter and Unfaithful, that TV series, that short-lived
Yeah.
one.
Yeah, so because and mainly because I really the body swapping and all it's so convoluted. As you mentioned, the rules don't seem consistent,
Yeah.
which is a big problem because the only way the getting away with murder works is if that it does the magic move bodies in physical location.
Yeah,
But that
I
doesn't,
think the
yeah.
writer didn't think that part out well enough. And
And it would,
I also think using the potion as a means to help hide the murders is not as clever as he thinks it is. And I think it would have just been better if they just were too, they, because they spent so much time listening to those true crime podcasts, they figured out a way to dispose of the body where they'll be free and clear, and you don't have to worry about the potion part.
yeah, that's what I would have gone with them listening to the true crime podcast is where they got in their brain like, oh, this is where he hid that body 40 years ago and they've never found it. We can do the same thing. They'll never find it in these woods.
Yeah, because I like the idea of really, again, going back to like something of the War of the Roses. It's really what it would be is you'd have to figure out, well, which one is trying to fight for power here. If Jake is the one who's like, I want to get back in my own body and I want to be with Kate, he should be the one plotting ways to do that. And the only thing that's holding him back is the fact that, unfortunately, Emma is in possession of the magic potion. So as long as she has that and he can't get to it, he is stuck there. And there's something more dramatic you can explore with that conflict than them eventually like working together. And then part of me is thinking like, well, okay, Jake is now in Emma's body. What is the one thing that Jake would love Emma to do that would get him, that he knows his body would react to, that would allow him to get advantage of that? Like, where's the psychological play, right? Or where's the thing that he could do that would make Emma off her game because in her body he is doing this, like ruining her job maybe, or compromising her job, or doing something embarrassing in public, like to damage her social status. Maybe breaking up her friendship with that girlfriend we had over the phone, like something to compromise Emma so that Jake himself can try and, return to his body. That would be in line with more in line with this premise, and also at the same time give us an arc for Jake to go through, because we have a very interesting arc with Emma, is that she just becomes more evil with every new conflict that is presented
Hmm.
to her, and I dig that. I think that's actually really well done. It just the convoluted aspect of the murder just comes basically out of nowhere.
Yeah, so I would, like I said, I would rework it. I would actually make it so instead of Jake like pining as kind of a dweeb over Kate immediately after they meet at the bar, that that there actually is a genuine relationship between those two. That over the course of like the story, what we find is that Emma is escalating, and again, removing the body swap element.
Mm-hmm.
Emma is just escalating towards more and more sadistic murdering, and that's what she gets joy from. Jake was going along with it for the sake of trying to keep his marriage alive, but he's just like the put upon everyman who's getting sucked in further and further, and Kate becomes the lifeline of him trying to get out, and that's where the conflict comes in.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah,
then and maybe what eventually escalates it is that Emma decides Kate needs to go.
and then that gives you your
And
parallel with the James murder. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Like, hey, um, I took out like you killed the one that I loved, or not loved, but that I was with. So how about I'll take out Kate and then we'll be even on that score. And you can either, and that's where he's got the moral, like the real moral quandary, because it's not just, like maybe there's something where they select people who are bad people, like a la Dexter.
Hmm.
So that's how he can morally justify in his head, like, okay, we're not taking out anybody who's a good person. It makes Emma happy. The world is a better place without these people. So I can be okay with it until Emma's like, well, now I want to be evens Stevens with you, so I'm gonna kill Kate.
Yeah, and that'd be good drama too, because now you've got this other character with a little bit more investment to them,
Yeah.
speculatively, that we care about. Ideally, I mean, that's the trick. We would have to give something to Kate to make us care more about her, because the empathetic nature of, oh, she's divorced, recently divorced, childless, living in kind of like a common house with a bunch of other people, trying to get back on her feet. Good start, but we need to stick with her a little longer and actually see her maybe overcome something, to root for her before we can actually follow through on the rest of that story. And especially for this one here, like, I just, she's the only, it feels like she's the only character to investigate this, and she's investigating it just because the writer needs her to, as opposed to something genuine in there. Like if she cared about Jake and she's like, oh, Jake is doesn't know that Emma is doing this, and maybe Emma is gonna kill Jake now that she got away
Hmm.
with killing this guy, like that. And then if they had something with her and Jake beyond that just one scene, and also beyond the scene of where Jake is in Emma's body, so I would think, establish a pattern, or at least that might have some more resonance. So that's something for the writer to consider doing, in addition to refining the rules of the magic potion and those dead bodies, because that's just not working in its current state. So with that being said, little Chad, for this script, would you give it a green light or a pass?
It's a pass.
Yeah.
I just there's too much to try to rework or get right. It's a pass.
Yeah, for me, this one is more of a reluctant pass, because I still think the first half of it is solid enough, and I get what's going on there, despite some of the flaws. But I think that last half, even with what they try to do in the climax, it's needs too much work in order for it to work properly. Because I get exactly why this placed number 5 on the blacklist. There's a lot of aspect to it that is salacious, intriguing, interesting concepts of the an interesting play onto the body swap trope. I can see Netflix jumping on this right away as a something to produce, because it has, it's sex,
Mhm.
violence,
Yeah,
and
it's what is it?
infidelity.
It's sexy, right? It's got
Yeah.
stuff to try to just sell you on. Um, I can see why it would be popular, especially in Hollywood. Like
Hmm.
the morals of this script seem okay with Hollywood. I can tell you, like, I wouldn't see this doing like numbers in Middle America. Like maybe it would. I don't
Actually,
know.
I
I
think it
guess
probably would, because it's again, it's technically about a middle America couple. Wisconsin is, it's in that region.
true.
Not
I just
exactly a
think what was
flyover
the
state, but
movie
pretty
with
close. Yeah.
what was the one with Leonardo DiCaprio and Kate Winslet where they were like the middle American married couple like in the 50s or 60s?
Oh, I I think I know what one you're talking about, but I can't remember.
Yeah, and it just, that kind of stuff, even setting it there, but if you're trying to like kind of spit in the eye of those values,
Hmm.
it's a you got to do it. It's got to be more cohesive. I mean, if it was, I mean, I'm all for dark comedy or black, type movie like where it's just dark and you've got again this like it struck me as late '90s, early O's kind of indie, edgy stuff. Maybe a little more refinement, and I might have been able to get on board. I just didn't connect with, and this is personal. I just didn't connect with any of the characters, and it just so maybe it kept me out of it. A few more passes where that was worked on, I could probably maybe I could see being more on board with it. But for me, I don't see it right now as is.
Hmm. No, I think the gimmicks that it implores definitely gets it on the board, but it will need it would need some work if it wanted to be a standout film. Otherwise, it most likely end up becoming one of those kind of sexy cult films that kind of gets forgotten quickly until rediscovered by the latter generation as, oh, it's it's almost as fun and interesting as something like a Basic Instinct meets Freaky Friday, but it just doesn't have that staying power that a movie like this would need in a traditional market where theatrical release is paramount. So yeah, I have to say, like, props to props to the writer, Ross Evans, for an interesting concept and a strong premise. But I think, I mean, listen, you can definitely ignore us all you want. You got top five in the blacklist, sure, but I think it placed there more for um, the things that you describe and push and the edges that you push, as opposed to the landings you make, so to speak. So those are my final thoughts before we call it a night out there. Anything you want to say before we go, little Chad?
I would say this is definitely not the kind of movie you would go see on Valentine's Day if you were happily with somebody. So,
Right. This is or you know what? Actually, this might be to really appreciate that the problems you might have with your loved one are nowhere near as terrible as this couple's. But yes, I concur. I would say that this is this is although I will say, if this were in theaters during that late January, early February month, this would probably do pretty well that first weekend, just on the concept and initial craziness on its own. But I think it would just have a very sharp drop afterwards, more like a catch and release type of thing with the audience. But yeah, so with that being said, I want to thank everyone for listening. Little Chad, where can our wonderful listeners find you outside of this show?
they can find me. I co-host the Ascendant Art podcast. So if you just search Ascendant Art here on YouTube or Rumble, you'll be able to find it there. We do a show Friday nights, 9 p.m. Eastern. It's a good time, hang out, just talk about whatever's going on in the news, and hopefully people enjoy the show and can find me there.
All right. Well, thank you so much, man, for reading this eccentric little script and
Which, by the
sharing.
way, after this whole show, you can see why the log line was completely not
Oh
accurate.
God, yeah. Like this, the log line does not fall in sync with the script at all. Because I was expecting an actual retreat. Oh, they're gonna go somewhere.
Yeah.
What? Maybe they're using a retreat in a different context. I'm still trying to figure it out, because it said couples retreat. It's in the okay. Yeah, I think he just changed the script a great deal
Yep.
since the log line. But yeah, so as you can, when you read the script out there again, you can find it readily available with a Google search. If you're having trouble, just DM me or email me, and I'll be happy to hook you up. And please share your thoughts about the script in the comments and on the Patreon. We will be sure to read them on the next episode. And with that being said, I do hope you have a wonderful Valentine's Day with your special loved one and weekend, in comparison to the Emma and Jake travesty couple we read this week. With that being said, I want to thank you all for joining me. And never forget, guys, when it comes to great story, it all starts with the script.